Welcome to Syntax. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Front End Happy Hour podcast.
Welcome to this week's JS party.
Live from Shipshape Studios, this is Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot, with your hosts, Robbie the Wagner and me, Charles William Carpenter III.
That's right, Charles. We drink whiskey and talk about web development. I mean, it's all in the name. It's not that deep.
This is Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot. Do not adjust your set.
Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot is brought to you by Wix. We're big fans of Wix here on the show. We've had Yoav and Emmy on before on episode 98. If you're interested in more about Wix, definitely check that episode out. But I'm here today specifically to talk to you about the new Wix Studio. Digital marketers, this one's for you. I've got 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do in 30 seconds or less when you manage projects on Wix Studio. Work in sync with your team on one canvas, reuse templates, widgets, and sections across sites, create a client kit for seamless handovers, and leverage best-in-class SEO defaults across all your Wix sites. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio to see more. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Whiskey, Web, and Whatnot with your hosts, Robbie the Wagner and Charles William Carpenter III. With
Me, Charles. Third one.
With our guest today, Carson Gross. What's going on, Carson?
Not too much. Thanks for having me on, guys. Excited to be here and to talk a little bit. I have to admit, I don't drink a ton of whiskey, so this is going to be interesting. Let's see
what kind of fisherman are you? I
tried to pretend I was like, in college, I drank a lot of Scotch whiskeys, and then I was like, okay, I kind of like Irish stuff better. And then I realized I just like Jameson, which is like, it's just not good stuff. And so I drank that for a while, and then I just, you get old, and I don't know. I've got too much stuff going on. Started to wear me out, but I'll try some today. Well, it looks good. It smells real good. So
yeah, I'll address your Jemmy comment once we get to whiskey, but Robbie probably wants to let you introduce yourself.
So my name's Carson Gross. I'm a professor at Montana State, and probably most well known for making Htmx, which is a front end library that's a little different than libraries like React and so forth. It's a web front end library. And it focuses on hypermedia. So that's a big topic that I talk about a lot. I've got a book called Hypermedia Systems, which is at the URL hypermedia.systems that your listeners can check out. It's available online for free, but you can buy a hard copy version of it. And there's a Kindle version of it. We're going to try and get a paperback done, but it's a lot of work. I haven't been super happy with Amazon's printing system for the hardcover, but it is what it is. It's self-published, so
yeah, it's dope though. Well, before we get into all of that, then let's address the whiskey portion. Expand your palate, whatever. Today we're having the Bullet Rye 12-year. So whiskeys, when they are a blend, as this one is, they have to age state at the youngest one in that blend, and so Bullet says there are ryes aged up to 17 years in this one. It is 92 proof, has a mash bill of 90% rye and 5% malted barley. And away we go. See, we can't afford a Foley artist, so I have to pour into the mic. Not on the mic, though. That's a mistake.
It smells like a Christmas tree.
Oh, really? You're getting a little evergreen, huh? Maybe, but I was going to say
maybe more like Christmas time when you're drinking whiskey.
Like a lemon zest for me. But I guess I could.
It smells like whiskey to me.
It's definitely that. Yeah. Looks like they put some alcohol in a barrel, and that barrel made this, and that is also true.
That's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no wrong answers, but yeah, maybe there's a little green, little cut grass and lemon for me. So that's where I'm going with it. I'm going to prime the palate.
I did have the non-12-year one 2 days ago, and I'm going to say this smells better. I can't quantify why, but has a lot of similar notes. And one of the notes that I also got on the previous one was like bananas fostery, like a sweet desserty something in the smell. It didn't really taste like that, but like the smell smells like that.
The power of suggestion, that was bullshit. Because as soon as you said that, I started to feel a little like caramelized sugar in the back of my tongue.
Yeah,
I've
it
had
smells real sweet. I don't get it when I drink it.
Yeah.
It smells real sweet.
Yeah, this is a pretty high rye, so I'm expecting a lot of spice, but I'm not actually getting a ton of spice in the flavor.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
I really get a little more like, now I'm saying like a bit of char, a bit of maple in it, and then something else in the middle.
Yeah, it honestly
these are all
tastes,
made up words anyway.
Like bourbon should taste. I know it's not bourbon, but
Right.
like very sweet, but also they cut it with that spice. Like it's very balanced, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, it's very rich and flavorful, and it's even got a little burn in it, even though it's only 92 proof. So there's some of that. Listen here, Carson.
Yeah.
When you grow up,
Sometimes
you start
we
to
do
want
like 126 proof or something. Like it gets pretty high.
Yeah, we have done some
gasoline.
super hot stuff. Yeah, we've done. There's a couple of there's a few things they'll put out like 130 plus, and there's a Stag Junior that they've done a couple of batches like 130, 136 proof, and they call them hazmats because they're too high proof to bring on a plane.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you want to expand your palate, I just happened to have been situated right near Belgrade Liquors in Belgrade. And that is a very nice shop. So this episode is sponsored by Belgrade Liquors. They won't ship to me, but I went there once. Yeah, so I picked this up there, and they had a lot of really nice choices. Some like very nice like allocated things and some store picks and everything else. So just a side note, if you decide you want to like not just get Jameson, which I personally don't think is bad. Like I think it's good. It's a solid. It's actually better than a number of other Irish whiskeys that I've had. So it's like a good solid choice. It's like going and get Maker's Mark. Like, you know what it's going to taste like. It's going to be consistent. It's good.
Right.
Now, the Jameson 15 is really good. If you want to have something special, I'd go that direction.
Redbreast, right? Isn't Redbreast the same?
Yeah.
Same group.
Yeah, and their 12 and 15 is also very good. So
okay.
I'll
I love
recommend
Belgrade.
it there.
Belgrade's a cool town. You're talking about Belgrade, Montana for the listeners.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point out.
It's like Manhattan. There's a Manhattan. Like the next town over is Manhattan, but it's Manhattan, Montana, which is a little bit different vibe than
slightly.
most people know about. But that's a great little town. I go to church out there. So
nice.
very, very Montana town. It's where the airport is.
Yeah. It is where not one of the nicer La Quinta inns that I've been to is also. Not sure I'd suggest that, but the Belgrade Liquors, very nice.
Yeah, they're building a bunch of new hotels out there, so there should be some other options soon. But it's a better place. If you don't need to be in Bozeman, it's way cheaper to be out there.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, typically, I have family in Bozeman, so typically I just have a place to crash, but they just had a new baby 3 weeks ago, so it was mutually beneficial for me not to sleep there. Yeah.
Inconvenient of them.
Yeah, it's crazy. They just keep making more, keep making more Rugheimers. Like, you need more of those in the world. Okay, so as an avid listener of the show, Carson, you obviously know that we have a very stringent rating system from 0 to 8 tentacles, 0 being horrible. You probably should spit this out. 4 is middle of the road, not bad, not great. 8 is amazing, clear the shelves kind of thing. We tend to rate against other whiskeys of the same style, but you certainly don't have to do that. You can generalize it however you like. And Robbie likes to go first to really set the tone.
I do love going first. So this is pretty good. It's very balanced. I don't know that it is super screaming rye to me, honestly, but the tastes are good. It's better than the not 12 year. I'm going to say 6.8762 repeating.
Wow. Yeah. We're very serious about it on our show. Yeah. And later
my kid we were watching HGTV one time, and it was one of those like really miserable couples that like comes in and criticizes everything. And my middle son was probably about 6 years old at the time, and he turns to me and goes, "That woman is very specific."
That's funny.
That's pretty specific.
Yeah. And Robbie's also a woman, so.
Okay. Yeah. Not implying that, just saying it makes me laugh. That's a pretty specific number.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah. He's still working on his jokies. Do you feel prepared, Carson, to give a rating?
Yeah, I think I'd give it a 6. Definitely better than average. I don't like the like really heavy peaty stuff, and that you find in a lot of Scottish whiskeys. That's really my big turnoff when it comes to whiskeys is that really peaty taste. So I like the cleaner stuff and obviously the Irish stuff. So this is definitely different being rye, but I like it. It's good. It smells a little bit better than it tastes to me, but that's how it usually is. So
yeah, it goes that way sometimes. You could always try with a cube or get crazy later on. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I tend to consider price points and stuff too. Like, what's the value for money? And this is like $55, I think, give or take, something like that. And so I think it's a pretty good deal at that price point. Now, compared to some, depending upon if folks prefer a traditional, like high spice kind of rye, I think they might find this a little more mellow. But I do think it has some nice, yummy, good flavors. If I was going to look at like the $40 normal Bullet Rye or this, I would definitely pay more money to do this one. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. Actually, it feels a little like a 6, or if I'm Robbie, 6.254689999.
That wasn't the number I said, so you already forgot.
No, it wasn't. But I was just doing one. That embellished it for no good reason. But yeah, would recommend.
All right, let's do some hot takes.
Okay.
Hot takes. Well, yeah, they're not that hot, but I always say they're not that hot. Some of them are hot. I don't know. In TypeScript, inferred types or explicit types?
I don't use TypeScript, so I tend to mix. I think the ideal programming language, you use explicit types on the signatures and then inferred types in the implementation. So I think like local variables should be inferred, but you should explicitly, and maybe I don't know TypeScript well enough to know if you have to declare like the types of parameters and so forth, or if that's like OCaml has its whole, OCaml has like there's the Milner type system that'll figure out everything based on sort of global analysis. I don't want to say I don't like it, but it does, from my understanding anyways, is that it doesn't work well with object-oriented programming, which I prefer. I know a lot of people hate on object-oriented programming, but I like it. I think that's just a good balance of like, for your method signatures and maybe your public features, you declare the types and then internally you let inference do its thing. Definitely for like closures, like, that's sort of a funky where you have some sort of closure like there. You don't want to be typing out all the types. That's typically redundant or not useful. So but declarations, I'm a fan.
Nice. I think you'll find a friend in Robbie in object-oriented programming. So not that you wouldn't in me per se, but he's
functional programming.
So
I don't hate it, but I like object-oriented. I don't know. I was a Java programmer first. I mean, I guess technically I was a HyperCard programmer. Well, technically I was an Apple Basic programmer first, but my first like real experience with programming was HyperCard on the Mac, which is a totally different thing than anything most people are doing. It's very dynamic, loosely typed environment, really visual. And then I programmed a little bit in C and C++, which I barely understood in undergrad. And then as soon as I started doing professional programming, I was doing Java. And so I learned, have you guys ever read Thinking in Java? Bruce Eckel? Does that sound right? I think
That sounds right. I haven't read it though, no.
Yeah, it was massive book back in the day when you bought massive programming books about Java, and I just learned how to program from like that book, and it's object oriented, so I like it.
Nice.
I like that style.
I would argue that people that go out of their way not to use classes are still thinking about things as classes. They just don't want to admit it. Like you need that entity that you're like putting all of your pieces on, that like is the way you're grokking what it is. Like if it's all just functions, right. I digress.
Yeah, I do. I know, I agree. Like when I see people and they declare an interface and then there's like a trait, or they declare like a struct and then there's a trait, and then somehow that trait gets like glued onto the struct, and I'm like, that seems like an object to me. A class.
Right. You're just trying to reorganize it differently. Yeah, they're trying too hard to avoid. Yeah.
Put all that stuff in one place.
All right. Git rebase or git merge?
I use git merge because I don't understand rebase. I've had it explained to me a whole bunch, and I just I don't know. Every once in a while I'll check rebase just like to live dangerously, but I typically let I use JetBrains tools, so I let the JetBrains editor, like us famous programmers, we have little people that do that stuff for us, like the JetBrains editor. So I don't have strong opinions on it. I don't care. Like people are like, oh God, there's merge commits. Like, I don't know, man. I've got so many junky commits in my code base that I don't care.
Fair enough. YOLO it is.
Yeah. I see you skipped the Tailwind one, Chuck. Are we not asking
That's right.
that? Or are you wanting me to ask that?
You can ask it if you want to. I'm pretty sure it doesn't apply.
Okay.
Ask him
Tailwind
and
or
find
vanilla
out.
CSS?
I would use vanilla CSS. I've never picked up Tailwinds, and I know a lot of people who are really smart who like it, but when I just, my understanding, this is the common thing, like people, first reaction is really bad, and I've never gotten past that first reaction. I see like 15 classes on in a class attribute, and I'm like, man, that feels like that should be wrapped up. And maybe there's a tool to do that or something, but I think I like a little bit less going on in the class attributes in HTML in general. And maybe part of that is because Htmx is sort of competing for space on HTML elements.
Yeah.
And so I'll see like these examples with tailwinds, and there's like a teeny bit of, like 3 HTMX attributes and then like this massive tailwinds declaration. But I don't know. A lot of really smart people I know love it. So I can't say that if I really gave it an honest try, I would still dislike it. But I definitely have that initial like, I don't know, man.
Yeah. I just got
fair.
like, I found where it made me very productive and where I don't have to care about CSS. And so I don't disagree with like the aesthetics perception, and I know there's ways to kind of like obfuscate that or whatever else, but I'm just lazy, and this allows me to continue to be lazy.
If there was, and there might be something that exists for this, and I just haven't looked because I don't care, but like if there were a thing that just named everything for me, that's my biggest, like the biggest win for Tailwind, is I don't have to care like, oh, this is a container, this is a container inside, this is a like whatever you want to name this shit, like. So it'll just be like, if there's like a tool that was like, all this is named, and then I'm just like, all right, I'm styling that and styling that, then I wouldn't care as much either way. But
yeah, I get it. And, there's a lot of like just annoying people too that will be like, oh, it's so big. And it's like, yeah. And then you turn on gzip and it doesn't matter, or you don't, and it doesn't matter because network's pretty fast in a lot of cases anyways. But like I said, I know like a lot of people that are big HTMX fans and who are certainly smarter than I am and better web programmers than I am love it. So I think it's probably a skill issue on my part at this point.
There we go. Let or const?
I use var, baby. Come on.
There we go.
I use window dot.
Yeah.
Window dot.
Attach everything.
I do have a habit of using var just because I was trying to be IE compatible for so long with HTMX and you can only use var. You can't use let or const. I just have that habit. I don't hate like feature scoped variables as much as some people do. So I don't think var is like that bad when compared with let, at the end of the day. I'd use let just out of habit for locally scoped things. Why do you use const? I guess if there's a performance benefit, but my understanding is there isn't.
No,
so
it's just a readability preference, right?
Yeah. Usually when you're using let, you're in a sort of a local lexical scope, and it's pretty obvious what's going on. So the benefits of like having stuff be read only is probably not really high. So it's fewer letters to type let. So I'll go with the let camp.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's just dumb shit people argue about on Twitter, as you know.
I don't know the reasoning one way or the other. I just saw that someone was arguing about it, and I was like, we should talk about this. But
yeah, they have strong opinions.
No, I don't have an opinion on it. People argue about dumb stuff on Twitter.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah,
Kind
sometimes.
of funny.
It's always been such a source of intellectual stimulation.
It's all scholars on there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about nested ternaries?
I do not like them. I don't like ternaries. I use them, but I don't like them. They're bad because they're really complicated. It's control flow like in an expression, and it makes it really hard to like debug, for example. So you're like, oh, I just want to save lines. Why do you use a ternary? Because you want to save lines of code. And also like that's another situation where the scoping of like let can drive stuff like that, right? Because like lets don't hoist like var does, right? And so you can't have a let inside of two sides of an if branch. That's my understanding, is you can't have a let that like bleeds out of an if statement. And so that encourages this use of the sort of conditional logic in the expression. So that's maybe a strike against let, actually. And I've just always struggled with this. Like, what do you do in Java? What you do is you declare the variable first and give it a type and assign it to null, or you just declare it and it'll give it a value, and then you have to set it on either side. Like, it does some static analysis to make sure the value's set when you come out of the thing. I think that's how, I don't remember. But the problem with it is that when you have complicated expressions, even when you have like lots of ands and ors and so forth, like leaving, and I guess there is sort of an implicit control flow with short-circuiting ands, it makes it really hard to debug and see like when something's wrong in there. You know, when I was younger, I used to create these really complicated expressions that were like super tight and packed, like, you know, just everything in. And there's an advantage that you can sort of see it all. And if you know it, you can say, oh, that does all this, but it's really, really hard to debug later on, is what I've found. I think it's better at the end of the day to just suck it up and accept a little bit more code and write the if statement out.
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
agree with that.
I see, Robbie, you've left for me the most controversial question of them all, because, you know, they're pretty much at war with one another. All right, you have to pick intercooler.js or Htmx.
Intercooler versus HTML, they're the same thing. they're the same thing. Like, that's what I mentioned that in my talk, you know, because HTMX is obviously getting popular right now, or in relative terms anyways. Certainly when compared with intercooler.js. And the APIs for those two libraries, I mean, yeah, you have to bring in jQuery, but who cares? Everyone brings in jQuery anyways, at least like 5 years ago. The API is almost identical. And so I think that one of my takeaways from that is that timing is really, really important. Intercooler was too early, you know, and we've seen that before in tech. There were predecessors to React that were reactive, that just like, it wasn't, for whatever reason, the timing wasn't quite right for those libraries. Similarly with intercooler and HTMX. And I think and when I gave that talk at Big Sky DevCon, one of the lessons, like one of the things you can take away from that is, okay, if timing is what matters, then the longer you can hang around, the more likely you are to catch that timing at some point. And so to build on that, the best way to hang around is to have fun and try and be, you know, positive. Like, it's going to be really difficult for you if you're like pushing too hard. You know, I pushed really hard on intercooler for, you know, I wasn't as effective as I am now, but for like two years. And I kind of burned out, like arguing with everybody. I was very negative, and so I'd argue with people. Like, I'd go on Reddit and find someone saying something bad about intercooler, and I'd argue with them. And I know that wasn't effective, obviously, in retrospect. So I think, you know, one of my pieces of advice from that talk at Big Sky was to just try and stay positive and really try and have fun, because that's going to keep you in the game and take advantage of this dynamic where, like, the tides of technology come in and go out, and who knows what's going to be cool in 2 years, and maybe your thing will be set up perfectly for it. And it appears that HTMX was like that. I think if I had to pick between the two, like today, financially, I'd pick HTMX, but in my heart, I would pick intercooler because it was like, you know, it was that thing that was like, it was a good idea. It got a lot of grief. Definitely a lot of very mean things were said about intercooler. But I think there was a pretty good idea sort of like at the core of it.
Yeah, well, that's reasonable. That's a good transition, too. Robbie was really good with this, but...
Are you wanting me to say something?
Yeah, I think you should, yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned, you know, monetarily, like, part of the major success, I feel like, of HTMX is the whole meme factor and the, like, you know, I don't really know how to quantify it exactly. Just like, it's everywhere. It seems cool. It's like, people maybe can't say exactly what it is, but like, they all like it, which is maybe actually good, because, like, you know, a lot of people love React for no reason other than they were told to love React. You know, maybe that same kind of train, but like, I am curious how it, like, you know, how this whole thing snowballed into like why did you decide to start making it like meme culture and all of that?
Yeah. Well, so like I said, I tried it for the first 2 or 3 years of there was a little bit, it was of meme culture in it. If you go back, you can go to the intercooler.js.org site and like look at that. I think I called it a blog back in the day. There's a couple of jokes in there, but I didn't really, it wasn't like the vibe. Maybe it was. I don't know. I argued a lot with people. That's what I remember from that time anyways. It didn't really catch on. There was one like really brief burst of, when you're an open source, GitHub stars are what you judge everything by, right? So there was one brief launch from, I think, like around 1,000 stars to around 4,000 stars because of a Hacker News post that got really popular. So that was an indication there was some like pent up demand for this sort of alternate sort of hypermedia based approach to web development. It, tapered off after that and never really regained any momentum. At that point, that was Angular was really popular back then. And I think React sort of came along and just stomped on everything. And React, solved a lot of really hard problems. And so maybe React was right place, right time compared to Angular, for example. When COVID hit, that's when, if people haven't heard the story, COVID hit and I was trapped inside and was like, okay, I'm going to try and pull the jQuery dependency out. And I was like, okay, and I'm going to rename it and sort of like try and relaunch this idea just because why not? Like everyone's trapped inside anyways. When I did that, I had the intercooler.js Twitter account, which had, I think like, something like 1,000 followers or something like that, which I was like, okay. I hadn't been on Twitter in probably 3 or 4 years because I got, like a lot of people, I got alienated by the political aspects of it. It just got so intense and like crazy. And I was like, I can't handle this. I just want to talk about technical stuff. I wasn't really memeing because it was sort of, I don't know if you guys like, there was a time when like, even like what I would consider very like vanilla memes people would start getting upset about stuff. And I was like,
Oh yeah.
So I just sort of stopped interacting with Twitter very much. But when I relaunched, I was like, okay, like I'm just going to go and have fun again on Twitter. Like there was a time in like 2013 or whatever, when like everyone just said random stuff and it was like a lot more fun. And I'm just going to go, I have a long history and sort of like the memes from like the image boards and the message boards and all that stuff like for a very long time. And so I said, I'm just going to have fun. So I started doing it. And then, lo and behold, it actually was a pretty successful strategy, I guess. I got really lucky in that I was writing a book. So, I mean, this just goes to show you never know what's going to happen. But I was contacted by a big publisher, by Manning, actually, to write a book about HTMX. And I was like, this is awesome. I wrote like 90% of a book. And then I got a call from the guy. I don't dislike Manning. It's fine. I got a call from the main guy there, and he was like, I'm sorry, we just don't think we can sell enough of this. And I was like, okay.
Fair enough.
But they were like, but the rights revert to you, so you can do what you want with it. And so that happened basically like 2 years ago. I got that news and it was a little bit crushing, but I went to the other authors who were working on the book and was like, okay, guys, like, are you willing to stick around and like make the push to self-publish this? And we had set it up so it was pretty scripted. Like, we had it all in, what is it, ADoc? I forget the doc form for books, but we had it all like, so it was pretty easy to generate and all the rest of it. We were grinding really hard on the book. And I released that in July of last year. And right at that same moment, TJ, who's a Twitch like dev streamer, kind of OCaml focused dev streamer, he had sort of picked up on HTMX and he knew Prime and was like telling Prime, hey, you need to check this out. Hey, you need to check this out. And then finally Prime, for just the vagaries of the internet, like took a look at it and was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool and addresses some of these issues that I've seen with React. And then he got super into it. And that's really, I think when he got into it and then Fireship Dev did that, 100 seconds of HTMX video, it's gotten over 1 million views. Like it's insane. The reach that guy has. And those two things sort of like all that came together with the book release, like all in July of last year. And that just, then now everyone's looking at my Twitter account and I had been getting more and more wild and like having more and more fun. And I just was like, okay, I'm just going to go for it and be like as crazy as I can on Twitter. And it worked out. So I haven't alienated anyone too badly as far as I can tell. And definitely it's been a very good channel for, just having fun and getting the message out. So there's not a lot of strategy there. It's just been random, just random
I would
stuff.
argue it's laser eyes out of a horse face. I would argue that was actually the moment. Like all those other things are pretty good, but ever since then, you haven't had to work another day. It's been amazing.
I know. I still do have to work. That's not true, unfortunately. I have to work a lot.
This just in, Whiskey.fund is now open for all your merch needs.
That's right, Robbie. We're hearing reports of hats, sweaters, and t-shirts, as well as a link to join our Discord server.
What's a Discord server?
Just read the prompter, man.
Hit subscribe, leave us a review on your favorite podcast app, and tell your friends about our broadcast.
It really does help us reach more people and keeps the show growing.
All right, back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Being a professor is like, it's really not like summertime, you know, like I don't have classes, but I've got 2 classes I've got to prep for. And so I have to grind. It's not as easy as it sounds, but.
And they won't let you just teach HTMX. Like
they won't let me. They're letting me teach HTMX. And I have to I kept complaining that they wouldn't let me teach HTMX. And now I have to create the course for it. And so, you got to make all the slides and all the tests. I got to create a stupid project. It's like,
careful what you wish for. Exactly.
Yeah. You know, you say it's all just luck and random, but I think there's a lot that went into the popularity. And I think at some point you should think about writing another book about how to rebrand a thing that people don't like and make it way cooler. Because like a lot of people could benefit from that.
Yeah, I actually do think that there's at least like some kind of long form blog article. Like, so I was lucky enough to be at Big Sky DEF CON and heard your talk about the way that you approach trying to increase open source popularity, right? And that was sort of the context around it of, I have this open source thing, I'm trying to work on adoption. These are different ways you can engage. Of course, like meme culture and that way of attracting attention can be very beneficial and positive in a bunch of ways, as long as you I feel like that's the problem I have with, I love Hacker News, but also kind of hate it because a lot of people there are trying to argue how smart they are all the time. And so it's like, no matter what you say, everything sucks and you're stupid. You know, just have it like...
It's like the actually meme, right? Like, that's what Hacker News is.
Actually, 100% that. And it's fine. And there are a lot of like smarter than me people there. But the reason why I initially fell in love with programming was I have a set of tools and I have outcomes that I'm shooting towards. And the way that I get to those outcomes is kind of creatively up to me. And maybe it's not your way. And yes, maybe there are like ways to improve that incrementally over time, but it doesn't make me wrong inherently necessarily, right? Because I'm supposed to get to this outcome and I did. So that's already a good start.
And, you know, human nature is what it is. Like, we clan up, we've got our team, we've got our techs that we like, we've got our editor we like. But one thing I've come to realize as I've gotten older is just how effective people can be in tools that I have no desire to use whatsoever. You know, I've seen people be super effective with like Haskell. And I'm like, nope, not me. I've seen people be super effective with like variants of Lisp. And that's another thing that I appreciate it for what it is. And I think, just in general, but certainly in technology, there's a lot of cool technologies that you're not going to use. Like, here's an example of one that people might look down their nose at, like Cold Fusion, right? Cold Fusion was this sort of PHP-like, but more enterprisey system, but it had a lot of really good aspects to it. And, now, and as much as anyone's ever heard of Cold Fusion, they kind of, hold up their nose at it. But there were some good ideas in there and there were some interesting aspects to it. And PHP is another thing that gets, a lot of hate from like more sophisticated developers. And it's like, I don't know, guys, like people have built a lot of really effective stuff with it. So maybe we should, stop and reconsider.
Everyone thinks they work for NASA or need to do like life-saving calculations or something when half the web applications out there have a small user base and don't, modified CRUD applications or something.
No, I was just going to say, one thing like dynamic languages like JavaScript, PHP, Ruby, they don't perform as well as like Go and Rust and, some of the other languages out there, but they have flavors to them and they have sort of a culture to them. Like the libraries that are produced for those languages are different. Like Ruby libraries are very different than JavaScript libraries and very effective in their own way. If you can get your head into like, this is how Ruby works. And I like that. As I've gotten older, I've stopped looking for like the one true programming language and the one true way to do X or Y or Z. Like there's a lot of different ways to get stuff done. And I like that there are people doing them different ways and that they've got their, different take on things. It would be very boring if everything was like, the reality is the risk today is that everything is JavaScript or TypeScript probably. And that's not to say like I don't think you should use either of those languages, but I hope that there are other significant languages that can, and they can be interesting. That's one of the best things I like. I say this a lot about HTMX is like there's a guy on Twitter who's super passionate about, what is it? Worth's language. Come on. Pascal. What's the modern Pascal variant? I always forget. Delphi.
Oh, that sounds right, but I wouldn't know for sure.
I'm not sure. I forget. It's hard for me to keep everyone on Twitter straight, but Pascal is one of those languages that's like there's a lot of people. There, not a lot, but there's some people that love it. And like, sure, man, if it can make HTML, then you can build pretty good web apps using that in HTMX. I hope.
Yeah, and if you can pay the bills with it, like I guess it's relevant in some way.
A lot of that is really like we're coming full circle to where it's like you don't have to use the coolest, hottest, newest thing anymore. You can actually pick what you're most productive in. Yeah. Like if it's 15 years old but it's still doing a great job, who cares? You can still use it. Like I think we've backed off from it having to be like the hottest, newest thing all the time to like let's actually think about what we're using. And I think that's going to be good for the future.
Unless you work for Vercel.
Well, yes. Vercel probably doesn't.
Then you have to do that thing.
So I don't understand Vercel at all. I don't know anything. I know they're like the bad guys. Some people love them and some people hate them.
Well, they wear all black all the time. I mean,
they do wear all black, and you're asking for. I agree with that. Maybe they should do a horse laser thing or something like that.
Yeah, horse laser thing.
I need Guillermo to wear a floral shirt in his next keynote, and we'll know it's turning the corner.
A little more Magnum PI with that mustache, and a little less like, I don't know.
Yeah, like flip-flops and like some, Jimmy Buffett shorts or something like that.
Yeah, I think that would like lighten the whole image. Or watch some old Westerns. Good guy wear light, bad guy wear dark.
Yeah.
It's not hard.
No, there's something to that. But I don't know. My understanding of their business model is they kind of sell servers, right? Like sort of like
resell servers, right?
Yeah,
resell. Yeah.
I won't get into it. But I do know, what I will say is this. I really enjoyed Heroku. And if they're anything like Heroku, I paid lots of money for Heroku to like resell AWS servers to me. I think that something like HTMX actually like opens up the number of servers you can sell, right? Because you could sell like, okay, there's a Go stack that works well with HTMX. There's a, whatever. Like, so I don't feel like HTMX is necessarily aimed. Again, I don't understand it probably as well as I should, but I feel like there's nothing about HTMX that says like you can't sell servers to people. You still need servers to make the HTML. And at some level, the servers are more important because that's where HTMX tends to push a lot of logic back onto the servers. And so I feel like it's not, if you look at it from the right direction, I don't see HTMX as being something Vercel should be upset about.
They also sell the idea that they obfuscate complexity. So you go into like AWS console, it's very hard to do all these things. Or you take the next stage where you use their CDK or you Terraform or you whatever to provision. And they're giving you simplicity in having to do all those things. So you get write code, works this way, local, little configuration or whatever. They kind of do that. Utilizes existing web APIs, like technology that exists. It's kind of battle tested over time. It's not complex enough, right? Because you're siloing out your interactivity. You're replacing HTML. Oh, well, just HTML is HTML, but they have this specialized framework with its specialized way of now having server and client-side components and intermixing those and having like direct access to your data store on both sides.
I keep going back to Heroku. Like Heroku was super magic and I was happy to pay. I was happy to pay because it's like, I don't have to deal with AWS. Thank goodness. Like I can just deploy my web server and I can set up a database and a Redis server and get all the URLs like automatically added to the environments. I don't have to deal with like Docker and all this Docker Compose garbage to run my stuff locally. I just run this all myself. and I don't have to deal with K8s or any of that. Like I don't know anything about that stuff. And then that just kind of went away. Like, I know there's like fly.io and a couple of other businesses that I think are trying to, but they don't capture that magic of like, create an app. Here's my web server, push to this URL, and look, there it is. Holy smokes, this is amazing. But maybe, maybe a skill issue. I'm older, I don't know. But Heroku was like so magic. And then, they got bought by Salesforce, I think. And
they're still kind of doing stuff, just not as cool. But yeah, Vercel is, I think, getting more towards that. Like they were we want you to use Next.js. We want you to use all the complex stuff. But now they're like sponsoring Astro, and Astro is very HTML first. Like the reasons I use it for my Astro sites are like I can just click a button and get my speed insights and my analytics, like stuff like that, where I don't have to configure any of that, and I just press a button and I pay you $5 or whatever. Always going to choose that because I don't want to do all that 100%. Myself.
AWS, from my perspective, is a nightmare. So anyone who can make that like not a nightmare, particularly for small to mid-sized projects, I think is going to do great. And even for larger projects, I mean, I'm sure there were some massive projects deployed on Heroku that no one talked about. They're like, all massive projects start small. So, you start small and then you get massive, and it's like, well, okay, we can have like a 6-month effort to port this to like raw AWS, or we can pay these people $20,000 or $50,000 a month. That's an easy call. Like not having to have your own, a massive DevOps team, and you're still going to end up paying a boatload for AWS anyways and getting all that tuned up right. So I think there's definitely a business there.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it's super interesting that like AWS doesn't put any money into making their experience nicer. Because
they don't have to.
I think it's on purpose because like Vercel is probably the biggest AWS consumer. So why would you want to cannibalize that and make it internal? Like just have them ship you all the traffic. Like,
yeah, because we all kind of assume also that AWS is basically the de facto standard. They're the cheapest. They have the most reach. They have the greatest uptime. They have all of the compliance stuff, like all these things you don't want to think about, they've covered from like their standpoint.
That's actually, here's a question for you guys. I teach a class, the very tail end of it is supposed to be cloud computing. So I teach like, first of all, like sockets and like, okay, here's what a normal cloud deployment looks like. But I just show them like slides. Like, here's what a load balancer is, and here's what an app server is, and here's what the database looks like, and here's what, storage looks like. But I don't actually like set anything up and like actually show them how to set stuff up because I don't want to deal with AWS. Like that's just such a like that would be such a nightmare to walk through. So do you have any advice on that? Are there any easier options, or is there? It's not. The problem is cloud is all proprietary. There's no. I guess there's K8s, but that's like its own thing.
I wouldn't start there because that's like so much overkill for the kind of traffic that most people would need, container orchestration because you have so many containers to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And I really like the SST framework. They've done some very interesting things. So they started out with the first version of their library was like a wrapper around the AWS CDK. And so you're expressing in code like what you want, like you said, I'm doing serverless, I need API gateway, I want to add authentication, so I just express all that in TypeScript and whatever else. But their third version now, they've expanded out, so they're not only AWS, but it is still AWS, and so it's like, but you can basically express what you're talking about in your slide just in code there, and then push it, they provision through that, and then magic.
Okay. I'm going to look into this, sst.dev. Except I do notice that it says pick your front end, and it's Next.js, Svelte, Remix, Astro, or Solid. There's no HTMX on this page.
Well, Dax is on Twitter. Yeah, we'll figure that out.
Is this Dax's thing?
This is Dax is part of this. And
Dax. I thought we were
friends.
I was
going to say, Well, so they have the Open Next project. So they've been constantly chasing that and saying you don't have to pay Vercel. You can actually pay like $3 a month through SST, provisioning stuff out because they reverse engineer the magic in Next and actually give you the same benefits, turning those routes into Lambdas and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah, I know he's rushing to try to get more and more stuff on that. So, I mean, all things said, like, right, an Astro site can use HTMX just fine.
It can.
But you should give him some shit about it for 100%.
Absolutely.
We support giving him shit.
Laser Horse is going to come in hot as soon as we're done.
Oh,
here.
yeah. I saw this SST bullshit, Dax. What's going on? Yeah. I do think you should talk about like the exciting news and tell folks what's up in Golden Master.
Yeah, so HTMX 2.0 has been released. It's not available on the net unless you go to like one of those the piratebay.org or something like that. So it's
Somebody
not available.
uploaded it.
It's not available online via legitimate sources at this point. We released it on floppy disk at Big Sky DevCon. So 3.5 and 5 1/4 floppy disks. Don't tell anyone, but the 5 1/4 disk is actually not right. I got that made and then was like, I got to change a couple things. But the 3.5 inch discs actually do have what's going to be HTMX 2.0 on it.
You bastard. You gave me the big one.
I gave you
you gave away
the good news. The good news is that there's literally no drives that can read those unless you have like a really old computer that still works, and somehow some way to communicate between that computer and like a modern computer. Those discs are basically like look at only because you can't buy modern drives for them.
It sounds like a challenge.
I
don't know
a
who had
USB-C
them.
Floppy drive.
No, the
you'd have to have
3.5 inch discs. You can get the 3.5 inch drives. They're cheap. They're $20, and I think you should have one just because it's funny. But the 5 1/4 discs, there was an adapter you could buy for a while, but that company went bankrupt. There's
For obvious reasons.
Yeah, well, the guy that I got that made the floppies for me is at floppydisks.com, and he's like the world's expert on floppy disks. He's in Southern California somewhere. I asked him, I was like, so like, could I get a 5 1/4 drive? And he's like, not possible. Like I've got all of them.
Oh, that's really funny.
He's not sharing.
Well, yeah, he's not selling them off, not for a healthy. I was just say I haven't had one of those since the days of Zork. If anybody knows that game. Yeah, that was about the last time I had one.
I
would
really
be
wanted to
afraid
get
turn on one of those old computers. I think they would disintegrate. But
yeah. I really wanted to get. Do you guys? You probably don't remember them, but well, for sure Robbie doesn't remember them. But do you remember the 8-inch discs, like the real big ones, the big floppies?
Ooh, I don't think I do. No.
Yeah, there were before the compact 5 1/4 inch floppy disks. There were 8-inch discs that were just these they look like records almost, and they were sweet. And I was like, is there any way we can get an 8-inch disc made? And he was like, not possible. Man, I think the US nukes like still use that format. And so I'm sure the government has like some secret program to keep those working, but not accessible for civilian use, unfortunately, because I think that would have been hilarious to like.
Yeah, that would have been super funny. It'd have been like you were showing up with LPs or something like.
Yeah, or like an 8-track, like, here you go, guys.
Oh, yes. Now I do remember 8-track. We had those in the house when I was growing up. But,
yeah.
Well, should we do a little whatnot, Robert?
Sure. Yeah, so something we try to ask everyone is if you weren't in tech, what other career would you choose?
If I could pick any career at this point, I'd pick baseball. I like coaching baseball quite a bit, like be a high school baseball coach. I'm more competent to be a high school wrestling coach. That's what I did in school. I wrestled from 7th grade, like pretty much year round through high school. And so that's what I was like. I gave up baseball. My dad didn't play baseball. Baseball, it's like fishing or hunting or like golf to an extent, whereas if your dad doesn't play it, it's real hard for you to get into it. But I was super obsessed with it, and my dad finally like relented when I was, I think, in 3rd grade and let me start playing baseball. And I got decent at it. My bat was okay. My glove was pretty good and I was fast, but I got really good at wrestling and just ended up getting super into that. And I always kind of regretted it. And now my kids, I didn't want them to wrestle because I didn't like the dieting culture around it. So I ended up having them like not mainly focus on baseball, but baseball I was definitely like most excited about. Like everyone else in the United States in the 90s, I played soccer, but I was never like super good at it and never super passionate about it. And so baseball was kind of like what I just always have focused on with my boys. And at this point, I'm like obsessed with youth baseball. so I could coach some baseball for sure.
I have two
I don't know
questions
if I'd be a very
as a follow-up
good
to
coach,
that then. Would your position in soccer, I'm going to guess you played like outside defense.
I played mid. Like I was like a right middle back because I was pretty fast. And so I was up and back a whole bunch. I was a good rec player and like a really crappy comp player. So it just was like, I didn't really fit in, like all my friends were better. And then wrestling came along, and it was so easy to I had a lot of success at it real quick. And it was like, okay, I'm
going to stick with this.
This is what I'm going to do. No, I think in retrospect, I don't want to say it was a mistake. I wouldn't be who I was if I hadn't, done that. But I appreciate the game of baseball. Wrestling, it's good, like physical, very individual. I was talking with my wife last night, and like, one really good thing about wrestling is you learn how to fall. Like I watch my kids fall and I'm just like, what are you doing? Like you're going to get hurt falling like that. When we ski a bunch, and so they'll go down and they just flop down. And I'm like, guys, you got to tuck your shoulder. Like, what are you doing?
Nice.
And so there's, some really good life skills in it, but baseball, the wrestling teams are kind of weird. It's so individualistic in a way that baseball, I feel like there's a lot, you're really working as a team. And baseball's super boring. One of the things I love about baseball is it's like boring for like ever, and then it's panic mode. And that's like that's how life is, like nothing happens, and then like the Primogen picks up your library. And it's like, okay, panic time to go.
Well, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, so that's one thing I really appreciate about baseball. So
I was going to ask for your baseball expertise because my friend was sending me yesterday. His son is very into baseball, and his freshman year, he's offensive player of the year.
Sweet.
He hit almost 400, had more extra base hits than singles, and one home run, the only freshman with a homer. Yeah. And he hit the wall 8 times and led the team in RBIs. So I guess that's good.
That's pretty darn
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, this seems good. Thumbs up. All right. Yeah. No, I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like he's a great baseball player. And one of the crazy things in baseball is that, the best baseball player on the high school team is like never even going to get a look at like minor league baseball.
Right. Yeah.
It's such an incredibly specific sport. And you definitely see this in programming to an extent, but I've seen a lot of it now in baseball too, where the tails, just the variance gets so high out at the tails. This is one thing that's hard. I think programmers, pretty smart group. And like anytime you start sort of getting out on the tails of anything, the variance gets super high, and it can be really depressing because you just are around like 2 or 3 people that are so much better than you. Even though you're good, you're way better than most people. They're like these 2 or 3 people that are just so vastly better than you because the variance is so high out at that tail that it can be a little bit depressing. It's one reason why I think a lot of smarter people are unhappy, is because they get into these situations where there's like always 1 or 2 people that are just way, way better than everyone. And if you're used to being the smart person, well, you get the consequences of that. So I see that in baseball for sure. I had a story I tell is my kid was a pretty good ball player. My oldest son, it's a long story, but he doesn't play anymore. I think he was 11. And he was playing in an all-star game, and this kid comes up who's like just massive. My kid's like normal size. And this kid comes up, he's massive, and he hit 3 home runs in this game against us. And when he hit the 3rd home run, he's like running around. His whole team's going nuts and whatever. The third base coach like turns to me and said, "That kid doesn't practice baseball." He comes out to play. He comes out to play because he wants to hang out with his friends who are on this team. And he was just this incredible athlete who just, and it's like, okay, like that's, I get it. Yeah. That's the way it is. Like they're just people that are really, and that's true in programming. It's true, and anytime when you get, it's an unfortunate consequence of getting good at something, you're going to be around these people that just are absolute beasts at whatever you're trying to do. So it can be a little frustrating.
I am curious about is it like golf where like it has nothing to do with like how muscular you are or how hard you can hit? It's like the technique, or is it like, is there any benefit to like working out a lot, or like, I don't know how it works.
Yeah. I don't want to say there's no benefit to being strong. There's quick twitch. Like there's the hand to eye, which I don't think can really be taught too much. There's a lot of nature in hand to eye. That's what I see is like the hand to eye. because you can work out as much as you want and it's not going to make you a good baseball player. On the other hand, obviously being bigger and stronger, like bigger, stronger kids hit the ball further and throw the ball harder. So it helps. It's not like, well, I don't know. I don't know other sports well enough to say, but, and wrestling for sure, being big and strong didn't guarantee anything. So it's similar in that regard. Like technique matters a lot, but it's not practicable. Like some of it to me anyways, as far as I can tell, it isn't really practicable. It's like the kid just knows how to throw a strike or knows how to hit a ball real hard or doesn't. That sucks because you get these kids like, and I, especially in youth baseball, you're like rooting so hard for these kids that just want it so bad. And it's like, man, I'm sorry.
It's not going to happen for you.
It's not happening for you. And
you need that leap in natural aptitude, and it's rare enough that you also have a work ethic, and maybe you decide to work out a little bit, because I think that's what Tiger brought to golf originally, because he was like so good and just like killing it in college and whatever else. And then he started lifting, and then he just started like just taking his distance that much further. It was just like, you're already awesome. Now this is how you just leapfrog everybody.
Yeah. You can be a good baseball player without a lot of natural talent, but you can't play college ball without a huge amount of natural talent.
Yeah.
And let alone semi-pro or pro ball.
I want to take it back just briefly. Another like little whatever, a question that we ask. So outside of obviously HTMX and your obsession there and React, of course, you love React.
Love React.
Are there any other, the old React, are there any other developers or projects you're really interested in right now?
I won't talk about HyperScript, which is my scripting language. I'm interested in that, but that's not that interesting probably. I like some of the libraries that kind of quote unquote compete with HTMX. So Unpoly is a great library that's been around for a long time. It's similar to HTMX in that it's hypermedia oriented, but it's a very different take on it. It's much more a batteries included library, whereas HTMX is very raw. It basically just makes it possible to make links and forms, out of anything and then replace small parts of the screen. Whereas Unpoly is a much more structured library. It's really focused on progressive enhancement. So it really takes that aspect of web development very seriously. And so, I tell people if you want progressive enhancement, like Unpoly is a better choice. You have to work at it with HTMX because it's so low level and raw. Whereas Unpoly is just more geared towards it. And it has like this notion of layers. And so if your browser has JavaScript enabled, you can do sort of like popover type things, like it's very easy to do that. Whereas with HTMX, there's no notion of that at all. And so you have to do that yourself if you're going to do it. And then that notion of popovers, if the person has JavaScript disabled, it will just be full page refreshes. And so everything kind of still works. And so it's a different take. The guy who worked on it is a great guy. I actually just put up an interview on HTMX with him about sort of the history of Unpoly. So I'm excited about that. There's another library that's similar to HTMX called Datastar, which was created by someone who came in and actually he wanted to rewrite HTMX in TypeScript. Like that was his big thing. He sort of came in.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I was like, we're not doing that. And so he did the right thing. He went and created his own version of it. And that's really focused on, I think, server-sent events. And then he uses what are called out-of-band swaps, where you sort of specify in the content that comes back, here's the ID to replace in that content. And so that can make things much more dynamic. And he's a Go programmer. And so in that environment, you have server-sent event support is really well baked into Go. And so for him, it's a very productive system for building hypermedia. It's still a hypermedia driven app, but it's a very different flavor than HTMX. Kind of mixes together HTMX and Alpine. I'm excited about those two. Those are the two that stick out in my mind to mention. There's a lot of really retro, kind of simpler games. And I think there's a big opportunity. We were talking about this after Big Sky DevCon, and both in software and in hardware, to sort of back off on the trying to be like the photorealistic, or everything's a MacBook now, right? To take the floppy disk thing with HTMX, wouldn't it be cool if that was actually a thing? The things were things again, instead of everybody's got this super thin MacBook or MacBook clone, and everything's downloaded over the web and or over the net, and there's no things anymore. It's just this one little I don't know. I think it'd be cool if like there was a sort of return to like more differentiation in software and in hardware. Like, let's just try something a little crazy and maybe like have some physical push buttons and stuff like that.
Have you seen Analog? That's like
Analog,
making.
no, I need to look at it.
They make they're remaking all the older consoles. So like I have their Super Nintendo. I think they're putting out an N64 this year sometime, and it's all this like uses the original cartridges, but it like doubles the resolution, and you can just still play it with the old controllers and whatever, and like
but a normal TV because you have resolution issues there.
Yeah, so that's
I think Carson would prefer an Atari 2600. But
well, they've made that. I don't know what all they've made, but they're kind of limited. So like they'll do a console and they'll make like I don't know 1,000 or I don't know how many they make, and then they're just like done.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So it's if you don't get one and it's the console you wanted, you're kind of screwed. So
that makes the secondary market like probably crazy.
Yeah,
but like I don't know. I'm kind of wandering from the original question, which was software oriented, but I feel like there's an HTMX falls into this too, like this sort of like look back at the past, not just as like bad ideas, but like maybe there's some cool stuff there too, like old Lisp machines. Like that'd be cool to check out like an old Lisp machine and see how it works. And like, what's the cool stuff this thing can do that like, these old graybeards were like complaining about, like the new stuff.
There's some irony there to you saying that now, but I do think that there's something to be said about like, can we not retire technology every 5 years? Can you go to the library and get
stability
a book?
Is actually nice, sometimes.
Yeah, stability, and also, I don't know, the past doesn't have to be oppositional and like dead, Like I think it's healthy when there's like, even references to the past, like in software. Like I feel like I'm going off on a tangent here again, but I like this idea of like going back and looking at stuff and being like, man, that was cool. Like, and it doesn't have to just be nostalgia. It doesn't have to just be this like dead, so synthwave. Do you guys know synthwave? Like, I don't know, like synthwave music. Synthwave music is this kind of, it's a genre. It's electronic music, but it's basically sort of like it takes sort of 90s riffs. So a lot of like guitar, like 90 or 80s and 90s style guitar, and then integrates it into, fairly standard electronic music. And I just think it's a great mix. It's like, this is like modern coding music that like I can throw on and kind of get in the zone to, but it also has this sort of reference to like a cool era. Obviously it was when I was young, so that's what I like, but I think that's cool. There's another guy, boy, this is getting really out there, but Pavlov Stellar, I think is his name. And he takes like 1920s swing music and then sets that to electronic music. And it's like, sweet. I don't really like swing music that much, and I don't really like electronic music that much, but he took those two.
But somehow this is working.
It was awesome. Like there's one he's got that's just got this sweet tuba line in it. And I'm just like, man, that tuba is crushing right now. I'll listen to that song all day.
You don't hear that often these days. I don't think you hear that often in these last 50 years. Can you imagine like Robert Plant being like, that tuba, that's crushing.
You know what this track needs? More tuba.
More tuba, more cowbell. More
tuba. But it's a great track. I don't know what to say.
Yeah. All right. We are over time here. Is there stuff you want to plug before we end?
Htmx.org is the HTMX website. Twitter.com or I guess x.com. Twitter.com. Be a man. Twitter.com. /HTMX_org is my Twitter account, which is, I hope, funny. And then hypermedia.systems is where the book is. So you can check
don't forget Big Sky DevCon.
Big Sky DevCon will be coming. 2025 next year. We're definitely going to do it again. It won't be as HTMX focused, I don't think, because there's just not that much to say about it. But it was a lot of fun, and Bozeman's very pretty, which is where it is a very pretty place. Although maybe we'll have it somewhere else. I don't know. Maybe we can move it somewhere else in the state, up in Kalispell or something like that.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. If you liked it, please subscribe, leave us some ratings and reviews. We appreciate it, and we will catch you next time.
You've been watching Whiskey Web and Whatnot, recorded in front of a live studio audience.
What the fuck are you talking about, Chuck?
Enjoyed the show? Subscribe.
You know people don't pay attention to these, right?
Head to whiskey.fun for merch and to join our Discord server.
I'm serious. It's like 2% of people who actually click these links.
And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and tell your friends about the show.
All right, dude, I'm out of here.
Still got it.